Producers and engineers, you need to stop worrying so much about gain staging. Well, kind of. You need to stop worrying about it in the way that I see so many people talking about it. You see, gain staging is super important, but it only matters in specific areas, and it's not usually in your DAW. Most DAWs run on a 32-bit float format, meaning that you have about 700 dB above zero before you truly clip. To put that into perspective, a 16-bit audio file has a dynamic range of about 96 dB. A 24-bit audio file has a dynamic range of about 144 dB, and a 32-bit audio file has a dynamic range of about 1500 dB. So effectively what that means is when you're moving between channels and plugins and buses inside of your DAW, you don't need to worry about clipping as long as you bring it down before you hit your final master, because that's where you'll be printing it from a 32-bit file into a 24 for streaming. I know this is kind of technical, but stick with me. So then it only matters if you're using specific plugins that are modeled to work in an ideal range, and those are usually the analog emulation plugins. And that's when you step into where things start to be important. You see, back when everything was ran on analog gear, you were fighting what was called the noise floor. Every single analog piece of gear, just due to physics, has some sort of noise, and if you would record too quiet, you're getting too close to that noise floor. So then every step along the path, you're introducing more and more and more of that, so by the time you have compressors and limiters and everything on it, that noise floor can get out of control. With so many of our sounds being VSTs and just made in the computer, and so many of our plugins being pristinely quiet, we're really only having to worry about that noise floor when we're recording vocals or guitar or whatever we're actually turning from a sound outside of our computer into digital sound through our interface. So that is where gain staging becomes super important. If you're recording a vocalist, you want to make sure the signal is loud enough that you're staying away from the noise floor, but at the same time giving yourself enough headroom that if the vocalist becomes a little bit more dynamic, you don't clip on the way in, which you can't fix. So the good rule of thumb that I've heard from basically everybody, and it seemed to be true in my own experiences from 10 years of recording music, is to have your vocalist peaking between -10 and -18 dB. You see, so many of our interfaces are so quiet now, the noise floor is beneath what most condenser mics even have themselves, meaning that if you're hearing a hiss, it's probably not from your preamps, it's probably from your condenser microphone. And dynamic microphones have the same issue, but the noise for a dynamic microphone is calculated a little bit different, and that's why you won't usually see a self-noise level on a dynamic microphone on any of the sites you're buying them from. But to get back to the point, gain staging is really only important on the way in, or if you're using very specific plugins that require a sweet spot. And then the final place that gain staging is important is at the very end of the chain, usually your mix bus, because those are the plugins that if they're clipping, they aren't going to have a chance to be pulled down before you hit export, because you're not delivering a 32-bit float format, you're delivering a 24-bit wave usually.